So, Siddharth, it seems like France is joining the same way we have seen in Belgium, Poland, and other countries, right?
Yes, so if you see, France is going live with e-invoicing in 2026, as well as Belgium and other countries in Europe like Germany and Poland. Other European countries are also making e-invoicing a mandatory feature.
How different is what's happening in France compared to those markets?
So in France, the scale of companies and businesses are larger than both these countries. Not on a drastic way, but it's a bit larger than these two countries. Apart from this, the models adopted by these countries change according to the government's needs. So if you see in KSA, they have adopted a three-corner model. Whereas in Malaysia, they have both four-corner and five-corner model using PayPal and My Invoice portal method. Whereas in France, the French government has introduced a model called the Y model.
What's really driving the e-invoicing reform in France?
One is to avoid frauds and improve the taxation collected by the government. And the second one is the transparency for economic growth.
Hey everyone, welcome back to an episode of Complyance. I'm Darshini. Today we are talking about one of the biggest challenges that Europe has been facing, France's upcoming e-invoicing reform. France is now following what many other European countries have already started, moving to a mandatory, structured digital e-invoicing for every business. To help us unpack this, I got Siddharth with me, our in-house expert on everything related to e-invoicing and the regulatory frameworks. How are you, Siddharth?
Hey Dashni, I'm doing good. Thank you for asking. I'm excited to talk about France and have a conversation with how France is unveiling the e-invoicing mandate.
So, Siddharth, it seems like France is joining the same way we have seen in Belgium, Poland, and other countries, right?
Yes, so if you see, France is going live with e-invoicing in 2026, as well as Belgium and other countries in Europe like Germany and Poland. Other European countries are also making e-invoicing a mandatory feature. So France is especially going live with this, being a large country and a prominent country in the globe. France is making the e-invoicing a mandatory thing in its country coming in 1st September 2026. So it's a great step for France.
Siddharth, so you have worked closely on national rollouts in Malaysia and Saudi Arabia. How different is what's happening in France compared to those markets?
Yes, so compared to those market, the main thing is the scale. So in France, the scale of companies and businesses are larger than both these countries. Not on a drastic way, but it's a bit larger than these two countries. Apart from this, the models adopted by these countries change according to the government's needs. So if you see in KSA, they have adopted a three-corner model. Whereas in Malaysia, they have both four-corner and five-corner model using PayPal and My Invoice portal method. Whereas in France, if you see, they have mandated, so e-invoicing is not alien to France. So they have implemented e-invoicing back in 2020. So even in the future, they might also go for B2C in the near future. So this way, depending upon the government's implementation and the government's requirements, the models and the requirements and the structure of e-invoicing changes in different countries.
Great. So let's get to the bigger question that the viewers might be wondering. What's really driving the e-invoicing reform in France?
So most of the governments and major countries do this e-invoicing transformation and make this mandatory for majorly 3 to 4 reasons. One is to avoid frauds and improve the taxation collected by the government. And the second one is a transparency. So governments need transparency on what types of businesses are there and how they are selling and what they are selling in order to give out subsidies and other business related advantages for economic growth. So next is the transparency, and the third one is the efficiency. So most of the invoices before e-invoicing will be in a PDF format or manual printed invoices, which reduce the efficiency of businesses drastically. So with e-invoicing in place, transmission and bills payment and all the side-by-side work related to e-invoicing becomes very simple and automated. So in this way, France has introduced e-invoicing and making it mandatory to improve efficiency, improve transparency, and reduce fraud.
Great. So you have mentioned earlier that France has already gone live with e-invoicing for the public sector. What did they actually learn from that rollout, and did it work?
Yes, exactly. It worked very efficiently. So France has implemented mandatory e-invoicing for B2G from 2020 onwards. So most of the public sector companies who do B2G transactions and all the government companies as well, they have went live with receiving and issuing B2G invoices through e-invoicing. So through this, they have established a system where this works and companies can easily adopt this learnings and systems and get compliant with other type of transactions like B2B and B2C transactions.
Okay, so let's get into what this really means for businesses. What exactly are they required to do under this mandate?
So the first thing is the timeline. So the first timeline or deadline which the France government has set is 1st September 2026. So within this deadline, all businesses, regardless of size and scale, has to be ready for receiving e-invoices. And on the same date, that is 1st September 2026, all medium and large businesses has to start issuing e-invoices. So this is the first step to understand. And the next thing is from 2027 September, all other small businesses has to issue e-invoices. So in this way, French government has implemented mandatory e-invoicing in phased manner for B2B e-invoicing.
You have mentioned about the size of the company. So, what actually counts as a large or a SME company?
Yes, so the French government has given three parameters to identify the size of the company. So for a large company, it should have employee count more than 5,000, or the turnover should be more than 1.5 billion, or the balance sheet should be more than 2 billion. So if any of these three align, it is a large company. And for a medium-sized company, the employee count is in between 250 to 5,000 employees, and that or the turnover should be in between 50 million to 1.5 billion, or the balance sheet should be in between 43 million to 2 billion. So this is for a medium sized company, and for small companies it is below all these three, that is the employees count is less than 250 and the turnover is less than 50 million, and the balance sheet is less than 43 billion. So if any of these align, then it is a small company.
Okay, so can you explain what formats they are supposed to be using for e-invoicing?
Yes, so if you see, many countries use different formats for e-invoices. For example, UAE has the PINT AE format, Malaysia has the MY PINT, and KSA has its own format based on UBL and XML, right? So in case of France, what they are mandated or what the government is ready to accept is there are three formats. One is the Factur-X format, and the second one is the UBL format, and the third one is the CIA format. So if the invoice is in any of these three formats, the government will be accepting this invoice.
So now that we have talked about what the mandate requires, that is the structured formats, certified platform, and real-time reporting, but I think now the companies would be asking, how does all of this actually work in practice?
So, to implement the e-invoicing in France, the French government has implemented what is called the Y model. So, in this Y model, there are three parties involved, hence the Y model. So, the first one is the supplier. So, from the supplier ERP or the supplier's software, the invoice is generated. So, this invoice data is then converted into standard formats, that is standard e-invoicing format, that is Factur-X format or UBL or the CIA format. So as soon as this conversion happens, this is sent to the public platform, public invoicing platform, that is PPF. Public invoice platform is the English translation of the PPF French word. So in this platform, we have to submit the generated e-invoice in the proper format, right? And this through this platform, the invoice is then sent to the buyer as well as sent to the government for validation. And from the buyer side, this invoice is converted back into a favorable formats as required by the buyer, and it is also advised that the supplier also archives the invoice for 10 years.
How do the suppliers send their e-invoices to the portal? Do they do it directly or do they send it through a vendor?
Okay, so there are a few methods in which you can submit your invoice to the PPF portal. So the first method is you directly submit it to the PPF portal. But the issue here is you cannot submit it in any format. You have to convert it into one of the three standard formats and then submit it. So if your ERP or software is not able to generate these formats, you need what is called as operator of dematerialization. So this is nothing but a system that converts your ERP or invoice data into the standard formats. And these are not authorized by governments and can be built or used. Third-party system can be used, which can convert into standard formats. So this is called OD, that is operator of dematerialization. So this is the first method that where you can convert it and submit it yourself. And the second one is by using a partner dematerialization platform. So these are nothing but government approved vendors or implementers of e-invoicing who take ERP data and invoice data from your software, convert it and then submit it to the PPF platform and then validate it before submission and send it to the government. So these are one or two methods by which you can submit to the PPF platform for e-invoicing.
So if I'm a supplier, I can either use the government's PPF or a private PDP or OD. But in all of these cases, by the end, the e-invoice has to be structured and reported, right?
Yes, exactly. So the e-invoicing should be structured, that is, has to follow the standard structure and has to be reported to the PPF as and when required.
So what's the actual difference between using the government portal or PDP or an OD?
That is one of confusing things that people encounter or businesses encounter. So the difference is that if you want to submit the invoices yourself, and you don't have a method of converting your invoice data to the standard format, you use an OD, that is operator of dematerialization. And there is, in this case, you will not have any validation or any layer between you and the government to validate and correct the errors. So this is one case. The next thing is the PDP. So in case of PDP, an OD is not required because PDP themselves have a conversion mechanism. And another layer is that they are approved by the government and accredited by the government. And they have other validation layers and other helpful solutions apart from just e-invoicing to facilitate this process and also support you throughout the e-invoicing journey. So this is the difference between PDP, OD, and you submitting it to the PPF platform directly.
Right. And this is honestly what most teams are confused about. It is figuring out which option to choose, what formats to use, and how to make sure e invoices don't get rejected. All of this can seem very overwhelming, especially with the 2026 deadline coming up. That's exactly why we put together the France e-invoicing readiness booklet. It breaks down everything: timelines, formats, and steps to prepare in plain language without the jargon. So if you're still trying to make sense of where your business fits in, this guide will help you save a lot of time and stress. Alright, before we wrap up, what's one hard truth you have learned while working on e-invoicing rollouts of major countries?
So one of the interesting things that we often notice is the dilemma of choosing a vendor and then implementing e-invoicing with a proper vendor, right? So I'll just quote an example here, like what happened in KSA. So one major company, they were very confused on choosing the vendor. They are switching between two vendors before deciding and finalizing, and they chose the wrong vendor finally. And what happened was after the go live date, they had major fails and their e-invoicing did not work. And then finally they returned to us for implementing our solution so that they go live properly this time. So most companies, they tend to misinterpret the solutions and how e-invoicing works and think it as one-time solution or a single-time cost. And they go with the cheaper one or one with less support and one with improper APIs, right? So the thing is, this e-invoicing should be considered as a continuous process, and you have to select vendors which are accredited, doing e-invoicing in multiple countries, have business as e-invoicing business as their core competency, have tax teams, have support for go live support and hypercare support, and has a proper dedicated CSM. So all these things have to be considered before choosing a vendor. And the main thing is the damage done through choosing wrong vendor is irreversible. The work done is double. So these are few things that companies mostly do not prioritize and go with the flow of selecting a local and cheap vendor rather than a proper global vendor.
So it seems like it's less about the regulation itself and more about how the company is set up to handle that.
Yes, exactly. So the regulation is just the top layer or the superficial layer. What comes under is the coordination and implementation process. So it is not just the vendor who will be involved. All the teams inside your business should also align with e-invoicing. So the major teams are the developer or the IT teams and the finance teams and the tax teams. These teams have to coordinate within themselves in order to form a proper roadmap, and a single person has to take ownership of this process and then follow through with this roadmap and then achieve e-invoicing in a systematic way in order for long lasting results and solutions. So e-invoicing should go on for decades to come, right? So if all the teams are aligned and the process and the roadmap is followed, then it is a robust process, and one time process can achieve e-invoicing compliance for decades to come.
France isn't just changing how you send invoices, it's redefining what an invoice is. So it's no longer a document, it's a live data, visible to the auditors in real time. This isn't just France. Poland, the UAE, Singapore, and every country is rolling out its own version of e invoicing. We help you stay ahead of all of them with one API that is built for 100 plus countries. If this episode helped, share it with your teams. I'm Darshini, and this is Compliance. See you in the next one.